Good evening to you. You. Good evening to you. You. Good good evening. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good evening. Good evening to you. You. Good evening. Good evening to you. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host tonight, Shantae Charles. I want to thank you, first of all, for your time and attention. We are in our last three broadcasts for the season. We're going to be hopefully hitting episode 100, which will be our actual 1000th episode. And I'm excited because I have decided that these last 3 days that I want us to take a look at the Constitution and the Supreme Court. I think this is a really good time to, in a good place to end as far as this season, especially on a thinking note. And I want to point out that if you don't have a copy of the Constitution or you don't have a copy of the Declaration of Independence, may I strongly suggest that you pick up a copy. You can get a copy, I think, for as little as maybe $1 to $3, depending on where you get yours from. But I have a couple that I'm going to show you tonight for those of you who are watching by YouTube and IG. And then I'm going to dig into a little bit as far as the Constitution and talk about some of the Supreme Court landmark decisions and cases that changed America. So here is one example of a copy of, it has a copy of the Constitution, a copy of the Declaration of Independence, some of the conservative things. This is actually one from a conservative standpoint in terms of what they put inside of it. It has Sir William Blackstone's Of the Nature of Laws, how laws are established, and George Washington's farewell address. Now, we don't celebrate George Washington because George Washington spent a lot of his lifetime chasing those who had been enslaved by him for the rest of their life. You can look up the story of Oni, who Washington spent quite a bit of time trying to bring her back into enslavement. Then there's another one out called America, a Patriot's Handbook. You know, that's a nice little dog whistle for certain kinds of people. This one includes the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution of the United States of America, the words of John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, Barack Obama, and more. So this is more of a composite, right? And then you can actually find one on just the highest court's most groundbreaking decisions and what those groundbreaking decisions centered around. This is super important in the day and age in which we live. This one contains the groundbreaking decisions on slavery and racial discrimination, school desegregation, having the right to counsel, abortion rights, voting rights, most recently 2010 campaign finance laws and things that changed, which is what gave us a lot of what we have today, which is a mess. And the Obergefell versus Hodges decision on same-sex marriage. So we're going to be looking at this over the next couple of days, the 20 cases that changed America, 20 landmark decisions. But tonight we're going to start with this one. The easy guide to the U.S. Constitution and other important American documents. Clear, easy to understand language explains America's most important documents. Now, let me give a caveat by saying I am your regular, average American citizen. I am not a lawyer. This is not legal counsel or advice. We are simply going over parts of the document and taking a look at some things. So, again, let me start with some fun facts about the Constitution. First of all, the Constitution is the oldest written constitution in the world and also the shortest. Now, they are not talking about the origin or treaty documents that the U.S. Constitution borrowed from. They're talking about the Constitution as a concept. So it is not the oldest legal document in the world. Okay. More than 10,000 amendments to the Constitution have been proposed, but only 33 have gone to the states for ratification. Of the 33, 27 of them have been ratified. Here's another fun fact for you about our Constitution. The word democracy isn't mentioned anywhere in the Constitution. So when we talk about fighting for our democracy, well, that's not in the Constitution, folks. It's an ideal, but it's written nowhere in the Constitution. James Madison was considered to be the father of the Constitution. He kept a detailed journal during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia. He supported ratification. He wrote many of the Federalist Papers, another set of reading that you should have in your library, and he wrote the Bill of Rights. The first and last pages of the original Constitution are kept in the National Archives in Washington, D.C. At night, the document is lowered into a vault capable of surviving a nuclear attack. The Constitution was written at Philadelphia Convention in complete secrecy. Yeah, we know how secret it was because we weren't in the room, right? 81-year-old Benjamin Franklin was the oldest man to sign the Constitution, and the youngest man to sign was only 26. All states sent delegates to the Constitutional Convention except for Rhode Island. Rhode Island was also the last state to ratify the document. Scholars aren't quite sure who actually wrote the Constitution, though many believe it was Pennsylvania delegate Gouverneur Morris. 3 delegates refused to sign the Constitution because they disliked the government it would create. The Constitution has influenced the writers of almost every other written constitution in the world. So let's talk a little bit about the landmark Supreme Court cases. And I believe this book takes us all the way through to, this one only takes us all the way to Bush versus Gore. So that was in 2000. So this one actually has more up-to-date cases. But these are just summaries. 1803 Marbury versus Madison. The court decided that the Judiciary Act of 1789 was unconstitutional. This ruling established the precedent of judicial review, the court's ability to decide whether Congress's laws were legal according to the Constitution. 1810 Fletcher versus Peck. The court decided that the legislature of Georgia could not revoke contracts awarded by other state legislatures. This decision protected legal contracts and strengthened the power of the Supreme Court to overrule state laws. 1819 McCulloch versus Maryland. The court decided that Congress had the power to create a national bank of the United States according to the necessary and proper clause of the Constitution. This decision gave more power to the federal government. 1819 Dartmouth College versus Woodward. The court upheld the right of private organizations to hold private contracts. This decision further protected legal contracts and strengthened the power of the Supreme Court to overrule state laws. So when people say they have a concern about who is on the Supreme Court. Okay. The Supreme Court has the power to overrule state laws. Okay. All right. 1821, Cohen versus Virginia. The court upheld a previous ruling by the Supreme Court of Virginia. This decision solidified the court's power to review decisions made in lower courts and therefore strengthened the power of the federal government. 1824, Gibbons versus Ogden. The court ruled that the state of New York couldn't award monopolies to companies engaged in interstate commerce. The court reaffirmed that only the federal government could regulate interstate commerce as outlined in the Constitution. And a lot of people know 1857, Dred Scott versus Sanford. The court decided that the slave, Dred Scott, would not win his freedom upon crossing into a free state. The court also ruled that Scott couldn't sue his master because the enslaved were property and not citizens. This decision angered Northerners in the years leading up to the Civil War. Ruling 1896, Plessy versus Ferguson. The court upheld racial segregation and the separate but equal doctrine by legalizing separate facilities for blacks and whites in both private and publicly owned places. This decision impeded racial equality for Black Americans. So when we talk about specific harm being done to Black people in this country, that is an example of one of them. That was not done to every single minority in this country. It was done specifically to Black Americans. 1904, Northern Securities Company versus the United States. The court decided that the Northern Securities Company was an illegal monopoly that forced the company to break up into smaller, more competitive companies. This decision strengthened the federal government's right to regulate interstate commerce. 1908, Muller versus Oregon. The court set a limit on the number of hours female laborers could work every week. This decision was one of the court's first rulings that protected the rights of laborers, but it protected the rights of female laborers. This is before women were given the right to vote, by the way. 1919, Schenck versus United States. The court decided that the federal government could restrict Americans' right to free speech if the speeches constituted a clear and present danger to the government. The decision validated the Espionage Act of 1917 that made it illegal to speak out against the government and the war effort during World War I. So, you do not have a right to free speech if it constitutes a clear and present danger to the government. Just thought I should let some of y'all know that, who are just slinging stuff out here about what you want to do to the government. 1954, Brown versus Board of Education, Topeka, Kansas. The court ruled that segregated public schools were unconstitutional. The decision reversed the court's previous ruling in Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896 and overturned the separate but equal doctrine that happened at that same point. 1963, Gideon versus Wainwright. The court decided that all defendants accused of committing serious crimes have the right to legal representation, even if the government has to pay for it. Although we've learned that if the government has to pay for your legal representation, you might not get the proper representation that you need in order to win your case. 1966, Miranda versus Arizona. The court decided that police must tell people they are about to question that they have the right to remain silent. So before an officer starts questioning you, they're supposed to read you your Miranda rights. Let me say that again. The court decided that police must tell people they are about to question that they have the right to remain silent, that anything they say can be used against them in court, and that they have the right to legal representation. These rights have become known as Miranda rights. 1973 Roe v. Wade. The court decided that the right to privacy protects women's right to have an abortion and that fetuses have no constitutional rights of their own. As we know, states are individually restricting in many different ways the Roe v. Wade ruling. They're just going down the line and restricting the weeks at which a fetus can be aborted. 1974, United States versus Nixon. The court decided that presidents must comply with federal court orders and hand over any evidence to be used in criminal trials. Hello, Mr. 45. The decision prompted President Richard Nixon to resign out of fear that the House of Representatives would impeach him. 1978, Regents of the University of California versus Bakke. The court decided that federally funded universities couldn't admit students on the basis of race alone because such policies illegally penalized non-minority students. The court decided that race was merely one factor such universities could consider when admitting applicants. 1998, Clinton versus the City of New York. The court decided that the Line Item Veto Act, which gave the president the power to veto specific lines of proposed laws rather than the entire law itself, was unconstitutional because it gave the president too much power. The decision sought to maintain the separation of powers embedded within the Constitution, which we're about to get to next. 1999, Department of Commerce versus U.S. House of Representatives. The court decided that the Census Bureau could not use statistical sampling methods to determine the number of people living in the United States and must count each individual person when deciding how many representatives each state has in the House of Representatives. Guys, this was only 23 years ago that this came into being. And 2000, Bush versus Gore. The court decided that a manual recount of ballots in the presidential election of 2000 were unconstitutional because there were no uniform evaluation standards. The decision effectively guaranteed victory to candidate George W. Bush. Now, let's get into the Constitution and let's talk about the sections of the Constitution and the section we're going to be reading from tonight. So, in the Constitution is divided as such. You have You have the preamble, which is the introduction to the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, are writing this Constitution to create a better country, establish justice, ensure peace, defend the country, cultivate general happiness, and guarantee freedoms for ourselves and future generations. The original is, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. Article 1 deals with the legislative branch, or Congress. It gives us an overview of Congress, the House of Representatives, the Senate, elections and meetings, procedural rules, salaries and restrictions, how Congress makes laws, what Congress can do, what Congress cannot do, what the states can't do. Article 2 gives us the executive branch, the presidency, the overview of it and its elections, what the president can do, the president's duties, removing the president from office and the reasons. Article 3, where we're going to be tonight, the judicial branch, the federal courts, overview of the federal courts, what the federal courts can do, treason. Article 4, the states and the people, tells us about keeping state records, citizens' basic rights, new states and territories, the federal government's guarantee to the states. Article 5 tells us about changing the Constitution. Article 6 talks about the authority of the Constitution. Article 7 talks about how to ratify the Constitution. And then we have the amendments. We currently have 27 of them. I won't get into all of them, but you do need to know the First Amendment, freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and the right and freedom to petition. Amendment 2, the right to bear arms. Amendment 3, housing soldiers. Amendment 4, protection against illegal search and seizure. Amendment 5, trial by jury and protection of private property. Amendment 6, the rights of those who have been accused. Amendment 7, trial by jury in civil cases. Amendment 8, restrictions on punishment. Amendment 9, powers left to the people. Amendment 10, powers left to the states. Amendment 13, slavery outlawed except for imprisonment. Amendment 14, American citizenship is defined. Amendment 15, voting rights for all citizens. Amendment 16, the federal income tax. Amendment 18, prohibition when you couldn't drink alcohol for a time in our country. Amendment 19, voting rights for women. Amendment 20, presidential and congressional terms. Amendment 21, when prohibition was repealed and the alcohol began to flow again. Amendment 22, when presidents finally got a 2-term limitation. Amendment 23, voting rights for the residents of Washington, D.C. Amendment 24, poll taxes have been outlawed, but yet we have states that are still trying to get around that and do things essentially that are poll taxes. Amendment 25, the order of succession to the presidency. Should something happen to our president, there is an order of succession. Amendment 26, voting rights for youth. Amendment 27, congressional salaries. So let's take a look at Article 3, the judicial branch. We're just going to begin, I believe. Or we might get through it. We'll see. I think we might get through it. All right, Article 3, the judicial branch, the federal courts. Section 1, overview of the federal courts. The judicial branch will consist of a head court and a system of lower courts that Congress creates from time to time. The judges presiding over these courts will keep their positions for life, so long as they maintain good behavior. Because if we find out that not only one's Supreme Court justice's wife, but you also participated in the January 6th, that position won't be for life. Judges leave their salaries at predetermined times, which won't be reduced during their terms of service. So, the Constitution does not establish a federal court system, but says Congress must create one. The Judiciary Act of 1789, one of the first acts of Congress passed, created the federal courts. Congress named the head court the Supreme Court. That's how we got it. Section 2, what the federal courts can do. The judicial branch will have authority over cases involving the laws of this Constitution, the laws of the United States, treaties, and cases concerning ambassadors and other foreign representatives. The federal courts will also have authority over cases related to shipping regulations and conflicts at sea, cases involving the U.S. government, cases involving disagreements between 2 or more state governments. The judicial branch will also have jurisdiction in cases between a state government and a citizen from another state, between citizens from different states, between citizens of the same state fighting over land that other states gave to them, and between a state government or its citizens and a foreign country or foreigners. The head court will hear only those cases involving ambassadors and other foreign representatives, and cases directly involving a state government. Congress can make exceptions to this rule. The head court will hear only those cases mentioned above that other federal courts have already heard. So when someone says something like someone is soft on crime, the Supreme Court, it specifically tells you in the Constitution what kind of cases that the Supreme Court actually hears. Did you notice that they weren't really about crime or civil? Yeah. Trials for any crime committed will be tried by a jury except for impeachment trials. Trials will take place in the state where the crime occurred. Congress can decide where to hold the trial if the crime wasn't committed in any state. So, when the head court will only hear cases involving ambassadors and other foreign representatives in cases directly involving a state government, this is called original jurisdiction. So, Section 3, treason. Treason is defined as waging war against the United States or assisting its enemies. Just in that little short definition, we already know someone committed treason, though he was never tried for it. Waging war against the United States or assisting its enemies. No one can be convicted of treason unless two witnesses testify or the suspect confesses in open court. Congress will decide the punishment for treason, but the punishment can't be extended to a traitor's relatives. Congress can confiscate a traitor's property only while he is still alive. The English practice of punishing the family members of the accused was referred to as corruption of blood. In other words, if you bad, your family is probably bad too. We don't do that here in the United States. So that was the judicial branch, the federal courts, how they were established, what their purpose is, what they can and cannot do. So I hope that as we continue to watch the coming proceedings and acceptance of the new Supreme Court justice, I hope we will keep in mind the actual powers that they have and that they hold. So, if you would like to come on tonight and share in some conversation about what we have read, feel free to tap on the camera and I will bring you in. If you're listening by Anchor, I want to thank you for your time and attention tonight. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host tonight, Shantae Charles. We will pick up again tomorrow with the Supreme Court landmark decisions, and we will be looking at campaign finance tomorrow, same-sex marriage decision, and then we'll be back inside of the Constitution. Thank you again for tuning in with us. Until tomorrow. All right. So I don't see anyone who wants to discuss tonight. Okay. I have one. Good evening.
Good evening. So I'm going to touch on something you touched on earlier when you said hello 45. Because it seems like there's a certain party that wants to rearrange and arbitrarily make up new laws.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's why I'm going over this. Because apparently people don't understand how much they're trying to get away with that is not directly prescribed for them to do.
Mm-hmm. And I received the thing. I'm a part with, me being into gun safety and stuff, and instructing and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a part of a whole bunch of things concerning gun safety, gun laws. And I got this thing. I gotta cut some of this stuff loose because it seems like anything dealing with gun and gun rights, they want to say liberals want to take your guns.
Mm-hmm.
And now they're trying to attach that to the Supreme Court justice that's up for nomination.
Mm-hmm.
See, and I'm like, y'all been lying ever since ever since President Obama was president. And when did he come out with your gun? See, I mean, they're pandering to the opposite of woke people,
Yeah.
and they're so asleep that they just don't get it. They can't see it. They keep telling these things, and nothing ever happens.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, when are you going to wake up to this? See, like one person said something about liberal, Democrat. That's what they're talking about, liberal. I am a registered Democrat, even though I vote the way I feel, what I feel is the best.
Mm-hmm.
And they're talking about, liberals don't like guns. They want to get rid of guns. I say, excuse me. I am a registered Democrat, which means, according to you, I'm a liberal. I say, I own many guns.
Mm-hmm.
I own a few guns.
A lot of people do.
Yeah, a lot of people do. I say, and I'm a minister. I say, so that lie that you all keep being told, you need to get past that. Because this is not about left or right. See? But they're doing that. They're using bill taxes and gaslighting and all that stuff, and y'all eating it up.
Yep.
So you're just eating it up.
And
at least do a little bit of research.
I'm just like, just pick up your Constitution and read it. Again, the Constitution, everybody needs a copy. You can get a copy of the Constitution anywhere between $1 and $3 at your local bookstore. You can order it online via Amazon if you don't feel like driving to a bookstore. As you can see, I have several different copies, because they're compacted with other important historical documents. I am a history buff. I like to read. I like to read history. I like to know the impact of historical things upon the present. But I get it. I get that everybody doesn't have that passion. However, you need a copy of the Constitution if you don't have a copy of anything else. And you need to keep it in your car. I would keep one in my car.
Yeah, even though for some reason the Constitution doesn't seem to work for a certain group of people.
And
I had to straighten out.
And to that I would say, for the people who do not think it works, I would say the Dred Scott decision was made null and void by the 14th Amendment. Because the 14th Amendment determined that if you were born on this soil, you are a citizen.
Mm-hmm.
So I know there are people who let me go to it. I know there are people who are racist who abide by the Dred Scott decision. I get that. But
that's what I was referring to.
Yeah, but the 14th Amendment says all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. That's everybody. That's everybody. So you can say all day long, I don't see you as a citizen, but according to Amendment 14, it nullified the group of people who had already been here, who had been born through the process of enslavement. And it said, even those, all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States. This is why people be trying to get here to have their children on our soil.
Yes.
Because they might not be a citizen, but they want to get here to make sure that their children are born on this soil so they can become a U.S. citizen by being born on this soil.
And, okay, let's go back to this certain group of people, a certain party. They were even trying to get those people out of here, the ones that were born here.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
See, so it's like, okay, are you going to abide by it, or? But see, this is the thing. Listen. I really had no beef with them until they started making up their own rules. See, once they started making up their own rules and lying, just blatantly lying to people, I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Can't you all see this?
Yep.
And
Yep.
then this is the thing that got me. We're the party of biblical principle. Where that's at?
Yeah.
Serious. Where is that? I haven't seen it, and I was telling people then, I don't see it. I don't see it because everything that I see them doing at that point was going against Christ, what Christ established, what Christ spoke.
Yeah.
But
There are a lot of groups like that I don't know how they got our email, but we have gotten some very interesting, weird emails from the Republican Party. And all I'm
yeah,
doing at this point is like blocking the email address so they can't keep sending me stuff and marking it as spam. Because I'm like,
yeah,
if somebody searches my email, I don't want anybody to be thinking that I'm trying to take part of any insurrection. And you will see the number of times I blocked all these crazy organizations trying to send me stuff, and you will see them marked as spam. Um, there was a video posted recently. I want to see if I can bring it up. Let me see. From my friend's page of people praying. They were actually praying as if number 45 was still president. Now, how crazy is that?
crazy,
Yeah.
zombified.
They were
The
praying as
opposite of
if
woke.
he was still president and asking the Lord to bless them. Let me let y'all listen. Hold on. The opening prayer begins with their belief that number 45 is the current president. They believe he's the current president. Like they don't believe that Biden is our president at all.
Physical, spiritual attacks, and may his voice together. So we pray, Father in heaven, we firmly believe that Donald J. Trump is the current and true president of the United States. You have raised him up for this season of time to be used to be part in saving a nation. Bless and protect him and his family from any physical, spiritual attack.
As one person said, that prayer didn't lift up off the carpet.
Nah. As a matter of fact, it went down to the carpet, beyond the carpet.
That's what you call, and the thing is, people think that this is some kind of fringe thing. They think it's a fringe group of people that believe this. But no, there is quite a few millions of people that actually believe that. And that's why you're seeing some of the resistance you're seeing in Congress.
Yeah.
That's why people are resisting her, because they don't even think that this presidency exists, even though we've been in it for what? Yeah. They are literally delusional, but it's quite a few of them. And this is a whole problem. So I'm going to encourage people, make sure you get out in the midterms and make sure you vote and make sure you keep the crazies out.
Yeah.
Because they are lining up to take seats.
Yeah, and those people that are speaking against being woke, they want you to continue to be sleep, comatose, and zombified.
Well,
so they can control you. But they want to say everybody is trying to control everybody else.
I just find it interesting that these are the people that are saying that black people are crazy and that, we don't need to teach certain histories in school. Those are the same people saying that number 45 is still president.
Mm-hmm.
That's how delusional we of what we have in our country right now. And it's not a small number of these people. This is what I want us to understand.
No, it's not.
And the closer
It's
we
not.
get to the midterms, you're going to start seeing an amping up of this. You're seeing it with what they're telling to their children. And you know that they're telling their children things because of the racial animus that's increasing in schools against black children.
Right.
They're teaching this stuff at home.
Mm-hmm.
So when they get to school and they're doing harassing things to children, it's coming from a place. It has a source.
Someone posted on Facebook asking the question, when is it a good time to start teaching critical race theory? And I said at birth, just like they do racism. They start racism at birth.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and they were teaching critical race theory in college. Okay.
Yeah,
Until the boys
it's a legal
decided,
theory.
oh, we got to make a fuss about this being taught in grade school, and it wasn't.
Yeah, it wasn't. I think it's interesting that you say that it can be taught from birth because somebody might ask the question, well, how is it being taught from birth? I got one for you. If your child has never seen a black person,
Mm-hmm.
or you keep your
Yeah.
children from seeing black people, because I know people who've done
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah.
I had a friend, she said she had not seen a black person in real life until she was 15. If you keep your children from having black friends,
Mm-hmm.
if you keep your children from attending black cultural events,
And if they want a black doll, and you tell them no, we're gonna get you a white doll because they're prettier. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
all of that is teaching. It's not just the
Yes.
things that we do, it's the things that we also do not do.
Right.
Because I can say, oh, I'm not prejudiced all day long, but if I never put my if I had a child, I have a godchildren, but if you never put your children in environments to see cultural differences and to respect and honor other people's cultural differences, that's a way that you can do that. That's a way that you can embed a racist mindset without even saying a word. You don't have any black
Right.
friends. Your children go to an all white school because that is possible in America in many places.
Mm-hmm.
You're not
That's
allowing
what
your children to see anything that is culturally not white. So, yes, it is still possible in our country to avoid introducing children to other cultures. It really is.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I see people saying these things don't need to be taught in school, that tells me you're already censoring and trying to filter out even more what your child is exposed to.
Listen, I often tell people that I have a friend named Dante who benefited from them saying that, making such a fuss about critical race theory and black history and civil rights movement. Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're trying to remove the history of civil rights movement out of public schools.
Well, yeah, they're doing it under the banner of CRT. So CRT is basically a catchphrase for anything that white people don't want taught about other cultures. That's really what it is.
Right.
It's Black history, it's Asian American history, it's Latino,
Mm-hmm.
Hispanic history, it's all of it. It's not just African Americans that they don't want the history taught on.
Right.
That's the other thing people don't realize. They're trying to get rid of everybody's history and
But
only
then,
teach what they perceive as
well,
the greatness of America in many of these cases.
well, listen, I just made a mistake. I said they only want theirs, but actually they're not teaching their true history.
Yeah, they're not going to do that either.
They're not teaching their true history, because if they did, that would mean that all the evil and stuff that they've done, which is what they're trying to bury and hide. See, this is why they don't want the other stuff to be taught. All those things would be, be manifested through their true history.
Yeah. So again, this is one of these things. We're going to be spending the next couple of days looking at the Constitution, looking at some landmark cases. And if you are a history buff, I encourage you to come on over for the next 2 days as we are closing out our season. And let's continue to have this conversation because it is important. I don't mind, I don't mind, children reading all kinds of things and documents and all of that, but make sure your children have a grasp, especially if they are middle and high school. Make sure they have a grasp on the Constitution. Don't wait until they get U.S. history to tell them about the Constitution and what their rights are. Start early. Because I guarantee you, they're going to run into some people who are going to treat them as if they have no rights.
Right.
So it's really important to get ahead of that so they know what their rights are. And you're not having an encounter where someone is infringing on your child's rights. Because those rights belong to everybody, no matter their age.
Yep.
That's another
now,
thing.
I'm going to say one more thing here, okay?
Go ahead.
Now, I know according to the Constitution and everything, if you were born here, you're a citizen. If you were born here and you are a person, but many don't consider us people.
Right. And so again, the 14th Amendment strikes down the 3/5 clause. It strikes down us being considered property. That's why a lot of people were upset with the 14th Amendment. Because now I can't put you under the jurisdiction of property anymore. I can't fractionalize you anymore. Yeah. Well, are there going to be people that try? Most certainly. But that's why you have to know your own rights. You have to know your rights. And nobody has the right to dehumanize you. Nobody has the right to fractionalize you. Pastor Ben? Go ahead.
Yeah, there was a post that I responded to, because somebody said, so somebody actually, defending us, saying about how we've been targeted and stuff, how police are more physical than people of color, especially black and brown people, than others. Like somebody said, well, they should, how do you say it? They should, they should comply, right? I say, there are many times, if you've been paying attention, there are many times that we did comply and still got murdered. I said, they shouldn't have infringed upon our rights. And that's where the whole thing starts at. They infringe upon your rights. You stand up for your rights. Then all of a sudden, they get physical with us. See? That's the way it usually happens with us. They're bothering you, got no business bothering because you didn't do anything wrong. And then once you stand up for your rights, they escalate it. And then all of a sudden, they put their hands on you. Then they want to resist an arrest. Resist an arrest for what? What were you arresting me for?
mm, mm.
And that's the stuff that gets lost in the middle.
Let me drop one more book that every family, especially if you black, should have in your possession. People gonna be like, what's she doing with that? Just have one in your possession. That's all I'm gonna say. This is called Black's Law Dictionary.
Oh, okay. Hold it up.
It's
Let me
huge.
screenshot it.
Black's
Okay. Black Law Dictionary. Okay.
Black's Law Dictionary. It defines certain terms. It defines your rights. It's basically the requirements for admission to legal practice in the United States, but it's a good book to have because it defines legal terms. When you hear certain terms, it actually defines them. A lot of people talk about, this talks about in American law, in Roman law, in modern usage, in English law. It defines words. A lot of people use this when they talk about the word black. It defines words like covenant. It's a really good book to have in your possession, especially if you have to read over legal documents that tend to be a little shady in the wording, because sometimes people are trying to get over on you. So it's a good document to have in terms of that. I want to go to, because people love to talk about this word right here. Let's see. Black. Let me go there. Black. What does black mean according to the laws, the Black's Law Dictionary? So they have Black Act. They have the Black Book. They have Black Rents. They have Black Muslim. They've defined what a Black Muslim is, by the way. They have Black Code. You know, the name given collectively to the body of laws, statutes, and rules in force in various southern states prior to 1865, which regulated the institution of slavery, and particularly those forbidding their reception at public inns and on public conveyances. So again, this is something you want to get in your possession. It's called Black's Law Dictionary. Add it to your home library. It's a great teaching tool, a great learning tool, especially if you have young people in your house that are interested in laws and definitions and their rights. So, Pastor Ben, I thank you for your time and attention tonight, and thank those of you who have tuned in. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host tonight, Shantae Charles. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness, so continue to be what, Pastor Ben?
Be light.
Be light. Take care, everyone, and have a good night.